Yeah, we're not tea reaps. It's very simple. In poverty-stricken areas, there's more crime because when people are poor, they get more desperate and they commit more crime. It's really not that complicated, and the history and legacy of slavery and Jim Crow still resonate today because we're literally only like 3 generations away from slavery. Um, and it turns out if you are born poor, you're more likely to die poor. If you're born rich, you're more likely to die rich. And that sociological constant um, holds true, especially for Black people who were enslaved on the basis of their race, and when they were freed, literally had no material wealth saved up. So, like, on the whole, Black people stayed poor in the United States. So when you talk about crime and the Black population, it's largely because of the legacy left by white supremacy and slavery. Um, and we could fix that by investing in Black communities and trying to right those historical wrongs with programs for members of the Black community. But we don't do that, and instead we get people like you who try and attribute it to like race, at like Black people have a warrior gene or something, which just isn't backed up by any kind of science. Um, or like their skull shape is a different size, if you really want to throw back into the racist quasi science. Um, but well, Black communities are controlled mostly by Democrats, but the common thought, especially among communities, isn't necessarily investment in those communities. It tends to be we want more police because more crime is happening. However, putting more police on the streets in more crime-ridden areas doesn't actually solve the crime problem. Um, so it's not that effective at dealing with that problem. Um, Also true. Redlining is still in effect, and that basically there are still a lot of subtle policies in place that, while not explicitly defined as affecting Black people, because of the like pre-existing socio-economic divide that has existed between Black families and white families, Black people still get economically segregated into their own communities. So we could set up programs specifically as some kind of what's the word for it? I for some reason my brain is coming up with repatriation, but I know that's not right. Reparations. We could come up with some sort of reparations plan. However, anytime reparations is brought up as a concept, people are like, "Oh, so you want to send Black people more money than white people? That seems really unfair." But like, I think there are other ways we could do reparations, like community programs in historically Black communities, or in communities determined to be like majority Black or whatever. There are ways we could do this, like investing in inner city schools, investing in community centers where Black and brown kids can go after school, um, investing in Black owned businesses, and also like all kinds of other like assistive programs. Okay, because right now in the United States of America, um, I believe there was information that came out of Chicago that indicated in and for the record, if you don't know this about Chicago, it is heavily segregated along racial lines. Um, but in Chicago, the average Black family has about 1/40th the amount of wealth the average white family has in Chicago. So like the disparity that exists between families is staggering. Um, and I think we need to take systemic measures to fix that, since it was systemic measures that made that disparity in the first place. Yeah, true. Rye 87, 100% correct. Like problems like alcoholism in the Native American communities uh, don't exist because Native Americans have some sort of gene that makes them more susceptible to addiction to alcohol. Like there are economic and social factors that push those communities towards substance abuse. Um, and usually it's because of economic hopelessness. Like, yeah, you're gonna lose yourself in a bottle of whiskey if like, you feel hopeless about your life and you have no way of making it better. Um, but yeah, like the 13 15 50 question I think is very revealing because most of the people who have that statistic like on their belt to just like throw out there immediately, most of them are doing it because they came up in like 4chan communities or like the boards on poll slash poll, and they enjoy talking about like how black people are just naturally inferior and they are like just these they're different from white people. And sometimes they won't like outright say that black people are inferior. They'll just say they're different because and then they'll like go on to elaborate that their solution to the problem is creating like a white ethno state and a black ethno state. But they don't have any ill will towards black people. Black people are just wired differently. And the science behind this absolutely does not back up that theory at all. In fact, all of the science indicates that these differences in crime rates are almost entirely due to the economic factors imposed upon black communities. So it's not super complicated. Um, but yeah, like like a lot of the general consensus if you go into these poorer communities is that they want more they want more cops on the street because the general wisdom or the general line of thinking in a lot of the United States of America is that if you have more cops there will be less crime, except that correlation, like that relationship between more cops and less crime, does not exist at all. In fact, having more cops on the street just incentivizes more arrests and more punishments for minor offenses. So instead of going after like murderers and rapists, there will be excess cops to go after the people who don't actually pose a threat to their communities. Um, and it's like this problem of circular policy making. So like you go, well, the people want more cops, and so they're given more cops by the people who run the states. And then there's police violence, and the states will be like, well, we need a commission to study this, and the commission will go out and they'll be like, well, actually, if we wanted to reduce crime, we could do it by investing, instead of in cops, we could invest in social workers or community programs. And the states go, hey, we could invest in social programs and or social workers and community programs, and people are like, no, we need more cops to keep us safe. And so it's this cycle that I think is also I'm oversimplifying it because there are also elements in the state governments that will say, no, that science can't possibly be right, despite the fact that every major push to reform cops, every major commission has found that if we invested more in social workers and community programs, we would drastically reduce crime. But every single time one of those findings comes out, there are people who will be like, no, that's ridiculous. It's the same thing with how I was talking about the other night about how providing homes to homeless people is actually the best way to combat homelessness and like actually saves more money than leaving people out on the street. It's counterintuitive to how a lot of people think things should work. They think if you have more cops, it should lower the crime, even though that's not how it actually works. They think there should be some sort of incentive for people to work, and that incentive should be the threat of homelessness. But that's not how it works. So like the most effective strategies aren't necessarily the ones that we currently think of as the most uh, like sensible, I guess. Um, let's what? I just looked at chat. Hotep Hotep Muhammad pub. What? In vitro fertilization is not a massive problem, my dude. what, what the fuck are you guys talking about in chat? Uh, God. I agree with you, Jose of Scranton. Too many people are being imprisoned for victimless crimes. I would like to work towards a society where we don't necessarily have prisons, but I also recognize that that's not viable at the moment. So I'm much more in favor of reducing the amount of criminals we have in prison, and I really think that our focus should be uh, less on punishment and more on reducing the rate of recidivism, which is like the rate at which people reoffend once they get out of prison. I think that we should be investing more in equipping people who are in prison with the tools they need to succeed once they get out. Um, well, Taylor Swift, you do realize that we currently let rapists and murderers walk around for like free, right? Like the legal system allows that to happen once they've served their time. Or would you rather we just murder all criminals? Um, oh, would I rather rehabilitation centers? I'm, I'm not quite sure like what my end goal would be, but I think having rehabilitation centers would be a more effective goal, especially because there are a lot of people who commit minor crimes to be sent to jail, so that they have like meals and like have health care, because outside of prison they don't have either of those things. Um, and I think that rehabilitation centers that better equip people for life after prison could avoid like that sort of recidivism as well as other sorts. Um, and I think that, well, yeah, Kamala Harris sent those people to jail. But also Republicans tend to be way harsher on people who've committed crimes, um, while not focusing on like the rates of recidivism. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that our prisons have become revolving doors that constantly are full to the brim, because they're becoming privatized institutions. So there are people who literally make money off of having more people in prison, and those are the people that Republicans tend to be in bed with, um, if there is a private prison in their state. So there becomes this huge incentive to imprison more people, and I think that that is really gross. Um, and yeah, I'll vote for Kamala Harris, and you want to know why? Because a big part of her platform and the platform of Joe Biden is releasing people who were put in prison for weed violations. I think that releasing those people, non-violent offenders whose only crime was smoking a drug that's now legal in like a vast majority of the United States. I think that that's a great move. I think that that's a really big step in the right direction. We shouldn't be punishing people who aren't like violent criminals. And if they are violent criminals, well, yeah, but Taylor Swift, Donald Trump isn't going to release those people from prison. So like your argument to that you should instead vote for Donald Trump, who's going to keep those people in it who I consider innocent people in prison, is a ridiculous argument. Like, yeah, I get that it is like comedic that Kamala Harris is one of the people who put a bunch of those people in prison in the first place. But like, yeah, I'll vote for her if she gets them back out again. Like, I have no problem doing that. Politics is silly, and sometimes this is how it works out. I care about policy, not about the past actions of the candidates that I support.